Okay, everyone. I'm happy here to be joined by Jared Moshe, who I just became acquainted with his work, I guess a few weeks ago, a really excellent movie called Aporia. And it instantly appealed to me because any of you who've been paying attention to anything that I write or say, usually sooner or later I indicate how much time travel has been my favorite genre of science fiction, and with that alternate reality, ever since I read, I guess, The End of Eternity back in 1959. I was just an infant back then. I was a little older, by Isaac Asimov. So I was really glad to be able to get in touch with Jared and talk to him about his movie. What led you to do this time travel story?
Um, well, I've always loved sci-fi, and to me, I had this kind of random idea of what would happen if someone like invented a gun that could fire a bullet into the past, and I was like, it's kind of a dumb idea, and so I sort of put it aside for a while. Um, and then later on, I was sort of figuring out. I'd become a parent, and I was trying to figure out how to explore that side of how the world suddenly felt really uncontrollable and really scary. And I thought maybe, what if I use this like sci-fi gun that can fire a bullet in the past as a way to explore that sort of uncontrollable nature of life and the desire to control it and do that. And then I was like, oh, that grounded this really crazy sci-fi idea for me and allowed me to come up with this story.
Well, it's a very original idea. I don't know, I've lost track of how many science fiction stories I've read, novels I've read, movies I've seen, television series, easily over 100. And I don't think I've ever come across anything like that. As I'm sure you well know, most time travel stories involve somebody physically traveling to the past or maybe the future. I guess the closest would be, I don't know if you're familiar with Gregory Benford's novel Timescape, which was published in the
I'm
1980s.
not.
Yeah, he doesn't talk about firing a gun to the past, but he has a pretty good gimmick figuring out how to communicate to the past, to send information to the past, which is a pretty provocative thing. But of course, having a gun and that can shoot somebody in the past, and the way you figured out how to do that, you could send a subatomic particle, to a particular place and time, and if that particle landed inside someone's head, the disruption it would cause would kill them. So, how'd you come up with that angle of the story?
So, I mean, I think the first way I came to everything was I didn't want this to be a story about like some super rich person, right? I think there's a version of this where it's like the richest person in the world builds this really fancy, like super sleek machine. Um, and so I didn't want like to go that way. I wanted this to be like a machine that was created by a bunch of two guys, by a guy who basically didn't really know what he was doing. Like he had ideas, he had thoughts, he was trying to figure it out, how to time travel, how to make time travel work. And I was sort of trying, as I was like, okay, and he's been piecing this thing together, and he doesn't, and it's like welding stuff, putting things. He doesn't know what works. He doesn't know what. He probably, if you asked him what part of the machine does, this is Jabir in the movie, he doesn't know probably what one thing does and one thing doesn't. So as I was trying to figure out how this machine would work, this hodgepodge Rube Goldberg machine, whatever you want to call it, it was really important to me that it was like, all right, how can it, he doesn't ever mean make a machine that could kill someone. Like he's trying to figure out how to time travel. So like, all right, in particle physics and such forth, there's this idea that like there are imaginary particles that can, go outside of space and time. So maybe he's trying to figure out how to send a particle back in time because we can figure out how to send a particle back in time. Maybe he can do something else and make a time travel machine. But and in so doing, he kind of stumbles onto this fact that like, oh, if this happens this way, it should kill a person. I don't know if it'll work, but like I it's an important it's like it could. And so for me it was how do we it had to be something that felt like it wasn't necessarily intentional. And so I wanted something that came of it.
Well, it's a brilliant concept. Before we continue talking about the concept, I just wanted to mention, you said it was the birth of a child that got you more focused on this. Um, and so I'm glad to hear that because I'm actually a grandfather now, but I remember very, very well, this was the 1980s, when my wife became pregnant with our now 41-year-old son, which is insane. I don't know how that happened. I still feel like I'm 19 years old. So I don't know how he got to be, over 40. But every single well-meaning person told me, hey, you better get all your writing done now, because once the baby comes, you're not going to be able to have time for anything. You'll be too tired, too exhausted. And it was so inspiring, to have a child like that. It is such a magical, wonderful thing that actually my creative output greatly increased. And so I'm glad to hear that you had a similar situation.
Yeah, I think becoming a parent just changes your life in a way that is both, makes some things more difficult, but it's really inspiring. It puts you in a new direction. And I find it an endless source of inspiration and ways to, look at the world differently for stories.
Abs- Absolutely. I mean, I think there basically are only two ways you can contribute to add to the cosmos, whatever exactly that is. And you did both of them. One is creating a human life, and the other is creating a work that that could live for 1,000 or more years. Certainly that happened. With Plato and everything that he wrote about Socrates, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it is really a wonderful thing. Uh, Getting back to the science and the science fiction in your movie, you're aware, I assume, of the movie Primer or Primer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also a movie which I'd recommend to you if you didn't know about it, and I think I talked about it, or I at least mentioned it in my review of Aporia, called Quantum Suicide, and that also is someone trying to build a time machine in his garage, and there is something appealing about that, and so I think your instincts, when you said, who wants to write a story about some huge, Rand corporation building where you have these scientists, working away, because we've seen that so many times. Uh, Let me ask you another question without giving too much away about the movie, because I think everyone should see the movie for themselves. It's a
Thank you.
really rewarding story. I enjoyed it immensely. There's certainly room in there for a sequel. Have you thought about doing that?
I haven't come up with an idea that really inspires me for it yet, but I would never rule anything out.
Okay. Well, that's a good answer. I mean, people often ask me that about, my novels, and two of them basically ultimately became trilogies or more, and the rest of them is, they're just standing there by themselves. Uh, but I agree with you. The more writing you do, the more you have things that are out there, and you may or may not want to go back to that at some future time. It's often unpredictable. Something
Right.
will happen in your life. You'll hear something, and you'll suddenly realize, oh my God, here is what the next chapter in this story would be. Um, I just looked briefly at your IMDb page and looked at some of the things you did uh, and I picked up somewhere you are working on a couple of other projects. You want to talk a little bit about that and how they relate, if at all, to Aporia?
I have a couple projects that I'm working on right now, a couple new features, and then a couple TV projects. I think I've not everything's in the sci-fi space, which is interesting. I tend to find genres as a fun. I like to explore genres. I mean, I made two westerns and then moved to sci-fi. But I do have a sci-fi TV show that I'm developing right now that I'm very excited about. That sort of uses it's sort of like a period sci-fi and mixes like sci-fi with horror. And then I have an action film that I'm also very excited about that is very different that I'm in the process of putting together, which if Aporia uses sci-fi to explore what it is to the experience of being a parent, I would say this script uses the white knuckled language of action to explore the experience of literally becoming a father. It's and so I think it's funny going back to what you said. I think becoming a parent really influenced me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I can't imagine, uh, even though I remember, of course, when I wasn't a parent, but I can't imagine what my life would be like now if I wasn't a parent. So it is truly a wonderful thing. Let me just get back again to another aspect of the movie. When you were, and of course, I haven't read the script or the original story. So you created, a cast of characters. Of course, I guess the wife is the protagonist, but there are two other very important characters, the two guys who build
Yeah.
the time machine. Um, when you were writing this, were you thinking about how you were going to cast this, or did it just sort of work out that way?
I tend to not try to think about casting when I'm writing stuff, just because the way it is right now, I could have my dream actor. You could have your dream, some person you've been writing something for a year and a half, and then you're like, I love this person. I'm going to send it to them, and they love it, but they're in a Marvel contract, so they're not going to be able to do another movie for 7 years. So, but I have to say, I mean, I could not have imagined a better cast for this film. Judy Greer is an absolute national treasure, and she's a true collaborator as an actor. And I think um, in casting her, it was really important because I think she's the type of person who, as an actor, is one of the most expressive, emotional actors out there. And what she can do with her face and how she can show feelings is something that is, I think, often used for comedy, but is actually incredibly powerful for drama. And so, I mean, she was fantastic. And then, once I cast Judy, Eddie Gathegi, uh, who, funny enough, that we're having this conversation today because he just made his debut in the Superman trailer as Mr. Terrific, that dropped a couple hours ago. If Judy is all sort of motion and emotion, Eddie is stillness and cerebral. And to me, that was like a perfect uh, visual sort of representation of of this characters, at least how she feels about them as well. Like she feels like she's always kind of running around, and he's sort of the rock that keeps things together. And of course, the movie we're going to learn that she's more of a rock, and she's going to realize she's more of a rock than she ever thought. Um, and for Jabir, who is in the movie, he's a immigrant from the Middle East who came here, who escaped here, and he was a physicist in the Middle East, and now he drives for Uber. And Payman Madi is one of the best Iranian actors out there. I mean, he's in if there's an Iranian film that is he's from a separation to everything. He's just incredible. He's just such a gifted, giving actor, and he's so smart. And I just remember how all the times he was like a great creative collaborator. We'd walk into a scene and we'd talk about, all right, what we can do here, to creatively that feels both true to the character while also, feels different than what we've been approaching so far.
Yeah, they're all excellent. And I've, of course, seen Eddie in For All Mankind. And I think I don't think I know. I first saw him, I can't remember the name of the television series. He played a major role. It was about maybe out like 5 or 6 years ago. Uh,
Startup?
Yes, Startup. And he
Yeah, he's great in that.
basically was riveting in that series. So he's a world-class actor for sure. And they work together so well. You would think that they even had a history of acting together, but that's really, I guess, a testament to how well you directed them and how well they fit into your plot. Let me just mention, by the way, apropos of the emotions and the wrenching decisions and conclusions. And again, I don't want to give too much away about the movie that the characters go through. Um, there is I'm not sure if you were aware of this. There are several different sort of narrative conventions in time travel stories, and it's not always the case that the people who cause the time travel to happen or then basically know about two worlds, two realities, right? The reality that they started in and the reality they changed it to. Sometimes people write things where everything has changed and the character who makes the change doesn't even know what's going on. Did you make a conscious decision to go with that narrative structure, or is it something that
Yeah,
just
that was really important to me because I think at the heart of this story is the idea that like all we are is a collection of the memories that we have built over our life, and our relationships are based on those memories and those shared experiences. And I think by having our character, our protagonists who use the machine, remember the changes and remember using the machines, uh, it adds a level of conflict between and separate, not necessarily always conflict, but separation between them and the other people in their world. And I think it makes it leans more into a what I want to say, which is that like, you know, how close can you be to a person if you have a different lived experience? If you have a different lived experience of their life and your life. If it's your wife, it's everything, but she has one memories of the past year and you have another memories of the past year. It's like the little things, the little changes, those though it's not always just the touchstone memories that make us who we are and make our relationships who we are. It's the little things. It's deciding, how we're going to be cooking our dinners every night, what we're rearranging our pantry, things that just, the random joke, the funny experience that happened while we were buying a Christmas tree. It's those things that really make a relationship between spouse and parent and everything. And I wanted to sort of pull at that and see how these characters could find a way forward if they didn't have that shared memory, shared experience.
Absolutely. Have you seen, by the way, Dark Matter? It's a television series.
I haven't.
The Yeah, the first season was on a few months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's been renewed for a second season. So that's another example of dealing with a character who knows about the different realities, and but everyone else around him doesn't know. and
Yeah.
and so it's something that to me as a writer always seemed the only way to go, the natural way to go, precisely for the reasons that you've talked about. um, Let me just go in a slightly different direction because I know a lot of our viewers and listeners are interested in this. So Aporia is on Hulu,
It's
right?
currently on Hulu. Yeah.
Right. Is it going to be, well, it's a two-part question. Is it going to be eventually on other in or on other streaming
I mean, you can
services?
rent it on Apple and Amazon and Google and all those places. It will move to other streamers. That's above my play grade. The distributor deals with that.
Right.
It came out in theaters last year, unfortunately, during the strike. So it was really, press was a little hard to get. But it's been on Hulu and it's doing great there. And it's always going to, no matter where it's streaming, it's always going to be available to rent or buy.
That,
And
that-
it's on Blu-ray and DVD if you want
that's
physical
good.
media.
Absolutely, that's very important. Listen, I have to tell you, unfortunately, it came out during. This is something that's going on all the time. And before the strike, there was COVID, and so that was not a good thing for theaters. And from my point of view as an author, it's almost never a good time for a book to come out, whether it's
No, it's tough.
fiction or nonfiction. On the one hand, now is a good time for these things to come out because people are buying presents. On the other hand, everyone else thinks that, so it's not a good time. The competition is worse, et cetera, et cetera. So I came to the conclusion a long time ago: just do your work and let it come out whenever it comes out, and
Mhm.
if it's good, it'll go to the top. Um, all right. So last, point I'll make, in case you didn't know this, but without revealing to the world where we live, because it's none of our business. Um, you probably don't know this, but I live literally down the road from you, not within walking distance, but my wife's late brother, but our sister-in-law still lives in the very town which is listed as where you live. So it's a small world, isn't it?
That's a very small world.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
We might have seen you like one of the delis and that God knows when. Okay, any final thoughts that you want to leave with our viewers or listeners?
No, I mean, I hope they'll go check out Aporia. It's a lo-fi sci-fi love story. And I think it's to me, it's just a film that is for both fans of sci-fi and you can watch it with your spouse who isn't. I think it'll emotionally resonate with them. So I really appreciate chatting.
I did too, and I'll say this to you, and our viewers and listeners might be interested. I'm a former president of the Science Fiction Writers Association, SIFWA, as it's
That's
called.
so cool.
Yeah, and so it just so happens that this time of year is when nominees are put forth for the various categories. So I'm going to put in a nomination for Aporia as the
Thank you. I appreciate
yeah,
that.
I because I think I really did enjoy the movie, and I recommend it. If you are already a fan of time travel, you'll love this. If you're not a fan of time travel, if you see this movie, you may well become a fan of time travel because it is time travel at its best. So thanks again, and good luck with all of your future projects.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You
All right.
too.
Appreciate it. This was awesome.
My pleasure.